Own Cell had spent 40 years reading warnings. Most of them were boring. Gravity wells, radiation pockets, biological zones where the air would turn your lungs into wet paper. He had cataloged 7,412 of them across his career, and not a single one had ever made his hands shake. This one made his hands shake. It sat in the middle of the archive room on a stone platform that was older than the station around it. Older, probably, than most of the species currently arguing in the hallway outside. The tablet was the size of a door, dark gray, and covered edge to edge in text. 6 languages running parallel. 6 different hands, 6 different tools, 6 different ways of carving the same message into rock. Caution, human space. Do not engage, do not provoke, do not wake. 6 languages. He had always thought that was strange. A warning written once was for travelers. A warning written 6 times was for people who already didn't want to listen. The Vale delegation arrived at 9 in the morning. There were 4 of them. Commander Sevet led the group. He was tall in the way that people are tall when they want you to notice it. His uniform had more decoration on it than the tablet had text, and he looked at the archive the way a man looks at a restaurant menu, searching for something that would serve him, and mildly annoyed at the length of the options. Own Cell showed them the tablet. He explained the 6 languages. He explained the age of the inscription, over 300 years, confirmed by 3 separate dating methods. He explained that the station itself had been built around the tablet, not the other way around. That whoever had left it had considered it important enough to construct an entire facility for the sole purpose of making sure it stayed where it was. Sevet took photographs, filed them under cultural artifact, low priority. Then he asked where the mining rights application should be submitted. Own Cell stood very still for a moment. "Commander," he said, "there are no mining rights. This is a protected border zone. The warning is 300 years old." Sevet was already turning away. Civilizations change. Whatever the humans were 3 centuries ago, they have clearly declined significantly since then. We've found no signals, no traffic, no military presence. An empire that cannot project itself is not an empire, it's a memory. It was the smile of a man who had confused confidence with intelligence so many times that he could no longer tell them apart. "File our resource survey request through the standard channel," he said to one of his aides. "We'll begin preliminary mapping next cycle." They left. Own Cell stood in the archive room for a long time after. The tablet said nothing. It was stone. It had been saying the same thing for 300 years, and it would keep saying it long after everyone in this hallway was dead. It didn't need his worry. But his hands were still shaking. He went back to his desk. He ran the administrative report. He sent the formal Keth objection to the Vale Dominion Council through the proper diplomatic channels. A document he had already written 3 weeks ago when he heard about the expansion proposal, just waiting for this exact moment. He sent it, knowing that they would receive it, log it, and do nothing about it. Then, because he was a careful man, and because 40 years of reading warnings had taught him that the thing you miss is always the thing you didn't look for, he ran a deep scan of the tablet. Not the surface. He had mapped the surface 100 times. The back, the underside, the stone underneath the stone. He almost didn't. It was late. He was tired. His tea had gone cold. Every practical thing about him said, "Go to bed, Own Cell. You have done what you can do." He ran the scan anyway. The results came back in 6 minutes. He read them. He sat down very slowly in his chair, the way a person sits when their legs have decided to stop working, before their brain has finished giving the instruction. There was a bottom half. Hidden, carved on the underside of the tablet, pressed flat against the platform. Invisible to any scan that wasn't looking specifically for depth. It had been there for 300 years. He had walked past it every working day for 11 years and never known. It was written in a different hand. Smaller letters, faster lines. Like someone who didn't have a lot of time and knew it and wrote anyway. He had to run it through 4 translation layers to read it. His hands were shaking badly enough that he mistyped the command twice. When it came back, he read it once. Then he read it again. We tried to stop them too. We know how this ends for you. We have seen it. We lived it, and then we did not live anymore. For what it is worth, we are sorry. We are so sorry. We hope you read this in time. We hope it matters. At the bottom, below the text, was a list of names. He had to cross-reference them against the deep archive. 17 names. 17 species. He cross-referenced each one. He checked them twice, because his brain kept rejecting the results and asking him to check again. Not one of them still existed. The Verath, gone. The Solon Compact, gone. The Murik, the Talsur, the Iridian Bloom, a species that had once spanned 40 star systems and built cities in the upper layers of gas giants. Gone. 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 Every single one of the 17 species who had signed the bottom of that warning had at some point in the last 300 years ceased to exist entirely. No survivors, no colonies, no fragments or remnants living quiet lives on the edge of known space. Just gone. He kept coming back to the date carved above the 17 signatures, because it was the part that sat in his chest like a swallowed stone and would not move. The bottom half of the inscription had been written 300 years ago, at the same time as the top half. They had known. Whoever carved the warning on top had known, even as they were carving it, that it wouldn't be enough. So they had turned the tablet over and carved a second message underneath. From people who had already been through this. From people writing to the next ones who would stand in this exact room and read these exact words and still not be able to stop what was already in motion. Own cells sat in the archive room for a very long time. The station was quiet. Down the corridor, the veiled delegation was sleeping. He looked at the tablet. He thought about the mining rights request, and the resource survey, and the expansion maps, and the formal diplomatic objection sitting in a council inbox that no one would open until morning. He thought about 17 species who had seen this coming and written it down anyway, knowing no one would listen, writing it down because what else do you do? Then he got up, went to his console, and started typing a second objection. A more detailed one, in 6 languages. The outpost didn't look like anything worth worrying about. That was the first thing Commander Sevet noted in his operational log. Small structures, low buildings with warm lights in the windows, fields that grew something green and unremarkable across a flat, quiet plain. 1 landing pad, 3 storage units, a water processor humming away at the edge of the tree line, like an old dog that had forgotten it was supposed to be guarding something. 43 humans. That was the census count from the long-range scan. 43. Sevet had brought 200 soldiers. He noted that in his log as well, under the heading, Appropriate Force, Precautionary. The boarding team went in at dawn. They came through the main doors expecting noise, panic, the specific chaos of people who have never been invaded before and are discovering, in real time, that their understanding of safety was wrong. Sevet had seen it before on 3 other worlds. It always looked the same. Crying, running, the desperate bargaining of people who still believed that the right words might make the soldiers leave. What they found instead was breakfast. 43 humans sitting around long tables in a large warm room, eating food that smelled like something Sevet didn't have a name for. No one ran. No one screamed. A few of them looked up. Most of them looked back down at their plates. A woman near the door said, "Close that behind you. It's cold," without looking up from her bowl. One of Sevet's soldiers actually reached back and closed the door. He caught himself and stopped, straightened, tightened his grip on his weapon. An old man at the far end of the table had a beard so large and so thoroughly overgrown that it appeared to be attempting a separate existence from his face. He looked at the soldiers. He looked at the weapons. He looked back at his food. He picked up his fork and held it for a moment, as if weighing whether it was worth finishing. He put it down. "Gonna be a minute," he said. He stood up slowly, the way very old bodies stand, the kind of slow that has made peace with slowness. He walked to the back of the room, through a side door, unhurried. Sevet signaled 2 soldiers to follow. They came through the side door into a small back room. The old man was sitting at a communications console, not running, not hiding, sitting, typing a short message with 2 fingers, the way people type when they learned it late and never bothered to improve. He hit send. Then he pushed back from the console, turned around, and put his hands up, palms out, the international gesture of, "I am cooperating, and I want you to notice that I am cooperating." His face was calm. Not brave calm, where you can see the fear sitting just behind the eyes doing its best. Just calm. The ordinary calm of a man who had expected this, planned for it, and was now simply watching the next thing happen. "All right," he said. "What happens now is on you." Sevet had him detained. He had all 43 of them detained. He had the outpost searched from the foundation up. Every storage unit opened, every file pulled from every console, every piece of equipment catalogued. He found farming tools, food supplies for approximately 8 months, medical equipment, books, actual physical books which struck him as fatally primitive, personal letters, children's drawings pinned to the walls of 2 rooms, a guitar with a broken string that no one had fixed yet. He found no weapons, no military equipment, no defensive systems, no panic rooms, no encrypted communication arrays. Just the one console in the back room, which had already sent its message and wiped its own log clean. He couldn't recover the message content. The transmission had bounced across 17 relay points before disappearing into deep space on a frequency his equipment didn't have a precise designation for. He could see the message length. 3 words. 3 words, sent to an address that resolved to nothing his system could locate. Across a relay network that shouldn't have been able to move that fast. He stood in the back room looking at the metadata for longer than he would later admit. 3 words. He pulled the outpost's senior communications officer, a young woman with red hair and a pen behind her ear, out of the detention area for formal questioning. She sat across from him with her hands flat on the table, and answered every question in a voice so neutral it could have been used as a calibration tool. Yes, the console was standard issue. Yes, the relay network was old infrastructure. No, she couldn't tell him what the message said, because she genuinely didn't know the content. She had just been told a long time ago to send it if this ever happened. "If what happened?" Sevet asked. She looked at him across the table. "You," she said. He had her returned to the detention area. He filed his report. Resources catalogued, personnel secured, outpost under Veil operational control, no military resistance encountered. He flagged the 3-word transmission as unknown, pending analysis, and moved on. 2 days later, his long-range sensor team flagged something on the edge of the system. Then a second thing, same signature, different location. Then a third. The analyst who brought him the report was very young. She stood at attention and held her data slate with both hands and read him the findings in a steady voice. And Sevet watched her and understood that she was working very hard to keep that voice steady. 17 large objects, distributed across a wide arc around the system perimeter. Each one had previously been logged as debris, derelict structures, possible remnants of old construction. They were not debris. They were ships. They had always been ships. They were just very, very good at being still. How long have they been there? Sevet asked. She checked her data slate. Based on the thermal signatures and the dust accumulation patterns, sir. She paused. Approximately 300 years. The room was quiet. Sevet looked at his formation data. His 200 soldiers, his fleet positioned neat and orderly in high orbit, exactly where he had placed them, feeling, up until about 40 seconds ago, quite sufficient. They were waiting, he said. It wasn't really a question. The analyst didn't answer. She looked at her data slate. Then she looked at the viewport. Then she looked at a point on the wall, slightly to the left of Sevet's head. Sevet looked at his formation data again. It had not improved since the last time he looked at it. Down in the detention area, the old man with the geological beard was sitting against the wall, with his arms resting on his knees, looking at nothing in particular, doing the same thing he had been doing since they put him in there. Waiting, like it was something he had a lot of practice at. Like 300 years of practice, give or take. Out on the edge of the system, very slowly, 17 dark shapes that had been pretending to be debris started to move. Dara Mace had been awake for 3 years. Not literally. She slept 6 hours a night, ate regular meals, ran 6 kilometers every morning on the track that circled the lower deck of the Burden of Proof. She was not sleepless in the body. She was sleepless in the way that matters more. The place behind the eyes where you put things you are waiting for. Things you cannot stop thinking about. Things that sit quietly in the background of every other thought you have, until the moment they stop being background. 3 years of watching a border. 3 years of sitting in a chair on a ship that was very good at being invisible, and listening to a galaxy that didn't know it was being listened to. The signal from May 7 came through at 0643. 3 words. She read it, put her coffee down, picked it up again, drank the rest of it in one go, the way you drink something when you are not tasting it. All right then, she said. She opened the fleet channel. The Burden of Proof was not alone. It had never been alone. There were 16 other ships arranged across the system's edge, each one running quiet, each one carrying a crew that had also been watching and waiting and sleeping in that specific wakeful way. The channel came alive in seconds. Not with noise, with confirmation signals, clean, short, one after another. Ready, ready, ready. 17 ships that had been pretending to be ruins for 3 years, and before that had been maintained by skeleton crews in deep rotation for decades, and before that had been built by people who understood that the day would eventually come and wanted to make sure there was something in place when it did. 300 years of preparation. Dara had not been part of the 300 years. She had only been part of the last 3. But she understood the weight of it, the way you understand something that was handed to you, carefully, with both hands, by someone who needed you to hold it right. She opened the long-range scan. The Veil fleet was in high orbit above May 7. Neat, organized, the arrangement of people who had never been wrong before, and had built their entire tactical philosophy on that foundation. She studied it for a while. Then she sent the terms. Return what you took. Return who you took. Then leave. We will watch you leave. She sent it once. Didn't repeat it. Didn't add anything. Then she waited. While she waited, Archivist Own-Cell's transmission came through. She almost let it go to log. She had enough on her screen already. 17 ships to coordinate. 43 people sitting in a Veil detention area. A fleet that was going to respond badly to the terms, and everyone on this channel knew it. She had things to do that were more immediate than talking to a Keth academic who was probably going to tell her something she already knew. She picked up anyway. He spoke for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, without stopping. He told her about the tablet, about the 17 extinct species who had signed the bottom, about the Veil Council vote and his formal objection, and the timeline of every decision that had led to this exact moment. His voice was the voice of a very smart person who had been watching a disaster form slowly over a long time, and had run out of ways to stop it, and was now just describing it as it happened. She let him finish. "I hear you," she said. A pause. "We're not going to war." She heard him exhale. "We're issuing a correction. There's a difference." He did not exhale again. She could hear him on the other end of the line, very still, processing the distinction. "What is the difference?" he said, carefully. "A war is something two sides do," she said. "This is something we're doing to one side. It's more like a renovation. You rearrange some things, you fix what's broken, you make it clear where the walls are." Another pause. "Will people die?" he asked. She looked at her tactical screen. "That depends entirely on them." She closed the channel. The Veil response to the terms came back 40 minutes later. It was not an acceptance. It was a counterproposal that included the phrase, territorial acquisition rights, and a demand for a formal surrender document from the nearest human governing body. Dara read it, set it aside, opened the fleet channel again. "All right," she said. "First formation, close the box." The 17 ships moved. Not fast, not dramatic. They moved the way you move furniture, with intention and effort and the full knowledge of where everything was going to end up. They came in from the system's edge in a slow arc, and they arranged themselves around the Veil fleet the way you might cup your hands around a small flame. Not smothering it, just surrounding it, just making it very clear that the flame existed inside your hands now, and not the other way around. The burden of proof took the central position, directly above the Veil flagship. Dara opened a visual channel. Sevet was on the other end. He looked like a man who had gone to bed certain and woken up in a different country. "Commander," she said. He said nothing. "The terms haven't changed," she said. "They're not going to. Every minute you spend deciding is a minute your people are sitting in a formation that gets less comfortable. You have no authority in this system," he said. His voice was doing its best. "This is Veil claim territory under the—" "Under the what?" she said. He stopped. "What treaty, what law, what galactic body gave you standing to cross a border that had a warning on it written in 6 languages? She wasn't angry. Her voice was the same as it always was, flat, dry, the voice of someone reading from a long list of true things. "You crossed it because you decided the warning was old and therefore didn't apply. That's the only fact that matters right now." She watched him on the screen. He was a man who had made a career of being right. You could see the shape of it in the way he held himself, upright, certain, the posture of someone who had never had to apologize for anything important. She gave him a moment, not out of kindness, because the moment was necessary, because there is a specific amount of time a person needs to understand the thing they don't want to understand. And if you don't give them that time, they never quite finish understanding it, and they make bad decisions trying to avoid completing the process. "Commander," she said again, "this ends when you decide it ends, not when I decide, when you do." She closed the visual channel. Behind her, her crew worked quietly. No raised voices, no running. The ship moved around her, like a body that knew what it was doing, which it did, because she had made sure of it, because 3 years of preparation means 3 years of knowing exactly what to do when the thing you were preparing for finally arrives. The Veil fleet held its position. Then, 2 hours later, the Veil lead destroyer fired. Dara put her coffee cup down very carefully. "All right then," she said. "Formation 2. The shot was clean, targeted. The lead Veil destroyer had the best gunners in the fleet, and they fired with precision, and the beam went exactly where it was aimed. The human ship moved, not dodged, not retreated. It stepped sideways the way a person steps around a puddle, without urgency, without drama, with the particular calmness of something that had already mapped every possible angle of that shot before it was ever fired. The beam passed through empty space. The return came in the same second. Not a weapon shot, a pulse. Tight, focused, surgical. It hit the destroyer's weapon array and nothing else. The destroyer's entire offensive capability went dark simultaneously. Power, targeting, every gun on the ship, off. The ship itself was fine. Life support running, engines running, crew alive and unharmed. Just the weapons, gone. Sevet stared at his tactical screen. He checked formation data, then checked it again. The motion of pulling up the screen and reading the numbers had become, over the last several hours, the thing his hands did when the rest of him didn't know what to do. Like pressing a bruise. Like checking that something still hurt the same way. The Keth ambassador's transmission came through 12 minutes later. Sevet didn't take it. He knew what it would say. He could have written it himself. He had, in his career, delivered the same message to 3 different governments on the wrong side of a veil engagement. The message was, we told you, we are telling you again now. Please stop before this becomes something no one can walk back. He let it go to log. He ordered the Second Fleet into engagement. The Second Fleet fired on the human formation from 4 angles simultaneously. It was the best decision available to him from a conventional standpoint, and his tactical officers had put it together in 20 minutes, and he had reviewed it and found nothing wrong with it. The human ships moved through the volley like water moving through fingers. The return came from 3 directions at once. Weapon arrays. Only weapon arrays. Every Veil ship in the Second Fleet went quiet in the same 40-second window. They drifted in high orbit, fully intact, crews unhurt, engines humming. The human formation rearranged itself, tightened slightly, like a hand closing a little more firmly. The Third Fleet lasted 11 minutes. Sevet watched the tactical screen. He watched 11 minutes of precise, methodical work. He watched his ships lose their weapons one by one, group by group, with the rhythm of something that had done this before, and found a pace that worked. He watched and did not say anything, and checked the formation data. 0 casualties. On the human side, 0. Not low, not acceptable losses, not a number he could process as the cost of doing business in an active engagement. 0. His fleet had fired on 17 human ships across 3 separate engagements, and had not put a single hole in a single hull. He was not sure, sitting in his chair on his flagship, which felt like a much smaller chair than it had that morning, whether that was mercy or something worse than mercy, whether it was kindness or the particular cruelty of being beaten so thoroughly that the other side didn't even need to try hard. He pulled up Own-Cell's objection. He had logged it 2 months ago, without reading it. It was standard procedure. Formal diplomatic objections from neutral parties went into the record and stayed there. You logged them so you could show you had received them. You didn't actually read them. He read it now. 11 pages. Dense. The Keth wrote the way they talked. Careful, thorough. A sentence for every possible counter-argument. A paragraph for every piece of evidence. Sevet was a fast reader. He read it in 12 minutes. The last line sat differently from everything around it. He read it twice. The humans are not violent by nature. They are thorough. There is a distinction, and it will matter to you at the end. He looked up from the screen. Out the viewport his fleet floated in formation. Still organized, still technically present. Weapons silent, all of them, drifting in the patient enclosure of 17 human ships that had not taken a single hit and shown no sign of being in a hurry. Thorough. Not rage, not destruction. Not the wild teeth-and-fire response he had, he understood now, been quietly hoping for. because rage was something you could meet and absorb and point to afterward as justification. Rage was emotional. Rage made mistakes. Rage gave you something to say at the Galactic Council hearing. Something about provocation. Something about defending against an aggressor. This was not rage. This was a carpenter fixing something that had been built wrong. He opened a direct channel to the human flagship. She answered on the second signal. "Commander," she said. Nothing else. He had prepared something to say. He had outlined in his head a negotiating position, something that preserved enough dignity that the conversation could be reframed as two parties reaching an agreement, rather than one party complying with the terms of another. "What do you want?" he said. He heard her breathe out through her nose. "Same thing I wanted at the start," she said. "Return the people you took from May 7. Return the station to its previous status. Leave the system. We'll watch you leave. No pursuit. No repercussions beyond this point." "And the mining survey?" "Was never real," she said. "You don't have a valid claim. You crossed a protected border with no legal basis. There's nothing to negotiate about the survey, because the survey doesn't exist in any framework that matters." He gripped the edge of his console. "If we comply," he said, "there's nothing else? No formal censure? No Galactic Council action?" She was quiet for a moment. "That's not really up to me," she said. "The galaxy saw this happen. What they do with it is their business. What I'm offering you is that we personally stop doing what we're doing. That's all I can offer." "That's not very much," he said. "No," she agreed. "It's not." He looked at his formation data one more time. His whole fleet. His 200 soldiers sitting in an outpost on a quiet plain. His 3 fleets with no weapons. And 17 human ships that had been waiting in this system for 3 years specifically for this moment. And before them, other crews waiting. And before them, the people who built the ships. And before them, the people who made the decision to build the ships in the first place, 300 years ago, when humanity looked at what it had been and what it was capable of, and decided quietly, without announcement, to go to sleep with one eye open. He had built his career on being right. He was very bad at being wrong. "Give me 6 hours," he said. She was quiet again. 4, she said. He nodded. She couldn't see the nod. He did it anyway. He closed the channel. He sat in his chair. He did not check the formation data. There was no longer any point in checking the formation data. He put his hands flat on his knees and looked at the viewport and thought about a line in a diplomatic objection filed 2 months ago that he had not read until it was too late to use it for anything except understanding exactly how wrong he had been. Thorough. Out the viewport, the human ships held their positions. Patient, quiet, waiting as they had always been for the next thing to happen. The detained colonists came home on a Tuesday. There was no ceremony, no crowd waiting, no speech from any official body. The transport set down on May 7's landing pad at mid-morning, and the colonists walked off in 1s and 2s, carrying the same things they'd had when they were taken, and went back to their buildings and their fields and their routines, without a great deal of fuss. The old man with the enormous beard walked directly to the meal hall. His plate was there. Somebody had wrapped it and left it in the cooler, and then taken it out and warmed it when they heard the transport coming. It wasn't the same meal. You couldn't save the same meal for 4 days and call it the same meal. But it was close enough. He sat down. He ate. Partway through, the red-haired communications officer sat down across from him. She put her elbows on the table and rested her chin on her hands and watched him eat. "Well," she said. "Well," he said. "You okay?" He considered this seriously, the way he considered most things. "I'm hungry," he said, "and my back hurts from sleeping on that floor. But otherwise," he cut something on his plate. "Yeah." She nodded. He ate. Outside the window, the fields were doing what fields do, which is nothing dramatic, just growing, the way things grow when no one stops them. "Think they'll come back?" she asked. He looked out the window for a while. "No," he said. He picked up his fork again. "Word travels fast," he said. Dara Mace filed the completion report at 1422 on the day the Veil fleet crossed back over the border. She watched them go on long-range scan. 17 dots, moving in the opposite direction from human space, getting smaller, getting farther. Her crew watched with her, the quiet kind of watching you do when something is finished and you aren't quite sure yet what to do with your hands. She watched until the last dot was gone. Then she sat at her desk and wrote the report. She was good at keeping things short. The report was 1 page. Everything that had happened, the 17 ships, the 3 engagement responses, the 4-day standoff, the return of May 7's population, the withdrawal of the Veil fleet, compressed into a single page, with dates and figures and a conclusion that said in plain language, "Border integrity maintained, no human casualties, matter resolved." She sent it. Then she made coffee. She sat in her chair by the small viewport in her quarters, not the command deck viewport, which was large and designed to look impressive. The small one in her room, barely bigger than a book, that showed nothing but a piece of ordinary dark sky and a scattering of ordinary stars. She was very tired. Not in her body. She had slept fine. She would sleep fine tonight. The tired was in a different place, somewhere behind her sternum, or maybe in her hands, or maybe just spread thin across everything, the way tiredness spreads when it isn't about sleep. 3 years of waiting, 3 years of listening, and before her, other crews, other people who had sat in other chairs on other ships in this same system, and watched, and waited, and done their maintenance, and run their drills, and read their books, and thought about whatever people think about when they are stationed somewhere quiet and cold, for years at a time. And before them, the people who had made the decision. 300 years ago, humanity had looked at itself in the mirror. Not a flattering mirror, the kind that shows you what you actually are, rather than what you'd prefer to be. They had looked at their own history, the parts that didn't get put in the clean version of the story, and they had made a decision together that was one of the harder decisions a species can make. We will be quiet. Not forever, but until something makes quiet impossible. And when that day comes, we will be ready, and we will fix the problem, and we will go back to quiet. Not because they were afraid, not because they had been beaten, because the last time they had not gone back to quiet, the things they had done were things that 17 other species had found necessary to record on the underside of a stone tablet, in a room that would outlast all of them. Dara understood this. She had been told it the way you tell a person something important, once, clearly, without dressing it up. She had held it for 3 years. She drank her coffee. It had gone a little cold. She drank it anyway. "All right then," she said. To the stars, to no one, to the specific quiet of a ship that had been holding its breath for 3 years and was now, slowly, letting it out. Out at the system's edge, the 17 ships went still. Not destroyed, not gone, just still. They powered down in sequence, one after another, each one going dark at its own pace, the way a building's lights go off, floor by floor, when the last people have left for the night. The sensor signatures faded. The thermal readings dropped. The dust, which had been disturbed by 3 years of very careful movement, began to settle back. By the time they were done, the long-range scans showed nothing but old debris, derelict structures, possible remnants of old construction. The galaxy watched them disappear. On 17 different sensor arrays, in 17 different command centers, in 17 different languages, officers filed reports and sent them up their chains. and sat in their chairs, and said nothing for a while. The open diplomatic channels, which had been full of noise for 4 days, councils convening, ambassadors transmitting, news services broadcasting from a safe distance, went quiet. 4 minutes and 11 seconds of quiet. No one planned it. No one called for it. It just happened, the way some things happen when an entire galaxy realizes at the same time that it has been holding its breath, and the thing it was braced for has passed, and now there is nothing to do but breathe. Cell went back to the archive on the 5th day. He went back because it was his job, because 40 years of habit is not a small thing, because the archive was still there, and the tablet was still there, and the work of cataloging warnings did not stop because one of the warnings had turned out to be entirely accurate. He ran the scan out of routine. He checked the top half, the 6-language warning. He checked the bottom half, the 17 signatures from 17 species that no longer existed. Then the scan returned something new. A 3rd section, below the signatures, below the date, pressed into the stone in the same way as the bottom half, flat against the platform, invisible without the right equipment, written in a hand that was small and fast and clearly made by someone who didn't have a lot of time. Cell looked at the date. This week. Cut into the stone this week. The archive had been sealed. There were security logs. There were entry records. He checked them all and found nothing. No entry, no breach, no anomaly. Just the archive, sealed as it had been. And the stone, bearing new text that had not been there 5 days ago. He translated it. He had to sit down on the archive floor to finish reading it, which was something he had never done in 40 years. He sat with the tablet in front of him and read it twice and then a 3rd time. They woke, they corrected, they returned to sleep. The warning stands. It will always stand. If you are reading this for the first time, turn around. If you are reading this after, you already know. Below that, in the same handwriting, they forgive you. That is the most dangerous thing about them. Never forget that either. He sat on the archive floor for a long time. He held the clay tablet of the original warning in both hands. It was heavier than it looked. It had always been heavier than it looked. He understood, sitting there, that the weight was not from the stone. Outside the archive, the station went on doing what stations do. People moved through corridors. Ships docked and departed. The galaxy turned. The warning stood. It had always stood. It would keep standing long after everyone who had ever read it was gone. And somewhere at the edge of human space, 17 dark ships sat in the quiet and waited and remembered how to be patient. They were very good at being patient. They had had a long time to practice.